there were lots of reports yesterday of over 100 far-right demos, protests, riots, no matter, they're calling them all sorts of different things. So here's The Independent saying it. Here's Al Jazeera saying it. Here is The Telegraph saying it.
Interesting.
And then here is the Belfast Telegraph saying it, because of course things are going on in Belfast, as well as outlets like ITV. So I think it's safe to say that a lot of the mainstream media pushed this story.
All of them?
All of them, yes. And to be fair, you can understand why. It's certainly a story of interest to the entire nation that there are 100 protests planned, supposedly.
According to who?
Yes, but we'll be getting into that, because these protests did not materialise. All these far-right riots, all these thugs we've been hearing about, they just didn't turn up. In fact...
Who are they?
Well, that's the question.
Who is this far-right? I've been waiting to see them. I've been hearing about them for over a week now.
Yeah, and it's strange how the far-right, quite often, is a very local phenomenon in a lot of the protests. And even the left-wing media has been admitting this, that a lot of them are sort of organic, happening in the place that they're occurring in, made up of local people.
So who are the people getting shipped in by the busload with pre-printed professional cards? Are they not far-right thugs?
No, it turns out they're not. They're very different. So I wanted to have a look at some of the protests, because what actually happened was there were just the counter-protests. And what were they countering? Well, their imagination. The far-right turns out... when the far-right plan a protest, no one turns up.
It's like, is the far-right in the room with us right now?
It may well be. Maybe it's behind the video wall. So here is Walthamstow, and this is in London. I'm going to go through all of the ones in London, because funnily enough, a lot of these counter-protests happened in places that weren't very English. I wonder how that happened, but here they are. Obviously, peacefully disrupting traffic.
Waiting on Tommy.
Yeah, apparently so. They're going to be waiting a long time, because I heard he's in Cyprus.
I think he's actually in Spain.
He's in Spain now, is he? Okay.
I don't think he was ever in Cyprus.
Was he not?
I don't think that was another piece of misinformation.
Was it? Oh, right. Well, I didn't want to track where he's going on holiday, because I'll get very jealous.
They've been doxing him and doxing his family. It's disgusting.
The media are shameless, aren't they?
Yep.
So here's some more. That is quite a big crowd, actually.
That is big.
But it's in London, and it turns out that a lot of people might have a vested interest in London to counter-protest these protests and riots.
Anti-racist mobilization, though.
Yeah.
So the assumption there is that there's some kind of racism going on, and they're there to stop it.
Yeah, this is part of the left-wing framing of it, that everyone involved is a fascist or a racist. Right. In which case, the fascist movement in Britain is somehow all of a sudden very, very popular overnight. I don't know how that's happened. Obviously, it's not true. But there were Islamists. Here we are, Andy talking about how they were chanting Allahu Akbar in anticipation for the far right turning up, the alleged far right. You can see quite Islamic for some reason. They're just particularly keen on anti-racism. I think that must be it. And yes, there's some more crowds here from the ground. And notice one thing here.
Wow.
The uniformity of all of the placards here.
They've done well with their cut and paste and their homemade signs, haven't they?
Yeah, there's a lot of synchronicity to their signage, isn't there? Almost like they may have all come from the same place.
I'm sure George Soros and or our government had nothing to do with it.
I'm absolutely certain that that's not the case. They would never do such a thing. And talking about things that never happen, you know how it's always the far right and the spooky, evil, reform voters that are violent and terrible and evil. And the left wing, obviously, they love peace, they love love, they hate hate.
In fact, anyone who ever incites violence, whether in real life or online, should be arrested, because it's always the far right that are doing it.
That's true, yeah. And it's never left wingers. No. And let's just have a listen to this, shall we? This is in Walthamstow as well.
They hurt! We've got children and women using those trains, destroying some relatives. They are disgusting, nasty bastards, and we need to cut all their throats and get rid of them all.
That's pretty self-explanatory, isn't it?
We need to cut all their throats and get rid of them all. Yeah! What?
Yeah. Hang on a minute. I don't think that was even going on in any of the rioting.
No. So here we have an Islamist extremist, or an extremist of some sort, promoting the slicing of throats of people he disagrees with. And people aren't challenging him, they're applauding him.
They're applauding him, yes.
That's an incitement to violence.
So he's also calling the people they're counter-protesting fascists and racists.
Yeah.
And of course, by framing people as fascists, even though there isn't a significant fascist movement in Britain, they're justifying violence against them.
Right.
That's the whole purpose of them doing it. Because, of course, we fought them in World War II. It's part of Britain's mythos. It's, our national mythology, if you will.
Well, it's Marxism. It's accuse the enemy of doing what you're doing in order to confuse them.
But the thing is that this guy has a bit of a recognizable face because it's been suspected that this is the same guy. And you can see the similarities. So he is a Labour councillor, which would make sense. And it would also make sense why he's been given, a microphone, why he's speaking at this event, because he's someone of some significance. And it seems like this is the same guy. We don't know for certain yet. It's not necessarily been confirmed. And people are talking about it like it's been confirmed, but we don't know. Maybe he's just got a doppelganger. It's possible.
Yeah. But regardless, if we live in a country where police without fear or favour, and we don't have a two-tiered policing system, which our Prime Minister keeps assuring us, then this chap will be arrested for inciting violence.
I don't see it happening. I'll be very surprised.
And he'll be rushed through the courts, as all the rioters have been.
Yeah, I imagine they're going to put him first to at the front of the queue. He's going to spend a lot of time in prison. He's definitely not going to evade justice. Of course, that's not what's going to actually happen. And then, of course, the media was running stories like brave Walthamstow protesters blast silly riots with anti-Nazi placards ahead of far-right fears.
There are no Nazis in this blooming country. Oh, there may be one or two. There's no swathes of far-right. What is this dream that they're trying to...
Also, that brave... Where were there wasn't a protest.
Yeah, it's hardly brave when you're like, no one's there to fight.
Brave surrounded by people that agree with you. Oh, apparently, according to Sampson...
News just in!
We've got news just in that he has been suspended.
Wow.
Thank you very much.
The Labour councillor has been suspended. So
it must be him, yeah. Well, there we go. I like news coming in as we're talking about it. That's very handy. So we've also got... Oh, here we go. Sampson's pulled it up for us. Labour councillor suspended after video images of him urging crowds to cut people's throats.
Now, I am in favour of free speech, as you know, but free speech has its limits. Incitement to violence is a limit. Explicit incitement to violence, not maybe incitement. This is explicit incitement to violence. This chap should be arrested and sent to prison.
Absolutely. Telling people to cut people's throats is obvious incitement to violence. Using mean words and saying, well, it could lead to violence is not the same.
No.
Otherwise, all the comedians in the country would be arrested.
All the good ones, anyway.
Yeah, that's true. So also, another diverse area, Croydon had a visitation from some Muslims who were obviously walking around willing to do some gardening for some old folk with their machetes and, some knives to cut up some cheese to make them sandwiches. Here we are.
They're going to a snack bar?
That's true, yeah. They're just really enthusiastic about it.
Yeah.
But they've got very cold faces because, it is
but not arms,
British summer.
Cold faces.
Yeah.
Look at the idiots, honestly. This is okay. This is approved of. This is part of the approved narrative.
And Carl rightfully points out that there is no EDL in Croydon, not only because the EDL doesn't exist, but also, why would there be an English Defence League when the English have mostly left?
Well, to be fair, that's where you would need an English Defence League. The English people are in a big minority, or is it a small minority, in Croydon. They need an EDL. Unfortunately, there is no EDL there.
Yeah, well, we're constantly told, aren't we, that being a minority is so terrible in this country, and one has to wonder what will happen to the British people when it happens to us.
We have to protect the minorities, so we have to protect the white, English, Welsh, Scottish, and Northern Irish and British in Croydon.
Yeah, well, I very much agree. So, in the absence of any meaningful protest, the counter-protesters decided to just riot themselves anyway. Here they are, a bit of a grainy video, but throwing rubbish about,
It's disgusting.
making a mess, sort of milling around.
causing trouble.
Yeah, pretty much. It does seem to just be a couple of people.
Low-level trouble.
Yeah, a couple of people just making a fuss.
Yeah.
I think, to be completely fair, it doesn't look like it was most of the people there. However, this was interesting. 8 people have been arrested in London for assaulting emergency workers. 50 people have gathered in Croydon, but aren't linked to protests, instead antisocial behaviour. Okay, this is similar to how it's not a terror-related incident, it's just mental health. It's not linked to the protest, it's just antisocial behaviour.
So obviously it's a largely peaceful protest.
Absolutely.
Accepting all the non-peaceful parts.
Mm-hmm.
So 50 people, they injured 8 emergency workers, and they were in Croydon.
Well, 8 people were arrested for assaulting emergency workers. We don't know how many emergency workers were actually assaulted. It's just plural. So more than,
I see. Yeah, sorry.
More than one.
Interesting.
So moving on to Finchley, which is still in London. Hardly anyone turned up. They still had the stand up to racism placards, though, even though it's just a handful of people. It looks like there are more police than there are actual protesters, if you can see. It's not the best picture. Maybe there were more and I just didn't see a good picture, but it was tiny. There's hardly anything to it. But Cole, nonetheless, doing his demographic duty here and pointing out the fact that 29.2% of the people are white, English, Welsh, Scottish, Northern Irish, or British.
Why are so many areas in London lacking British people?
Well, that's funny, isn't it? So Lewisham, which is South London, here are some more people. They got fewer of the signs, but they're still there. Look, if you can see the running theme throughout. And Carl again pointing out that another white minority area. And here we go. This is Hastings. There's a very clear version of this sign that we've seen everywhere. They were even in Plymouth as well when I covered those, all the way down there. But pretty sizable, to be fair. And then Bristol, and I'm going to torture you all with this one, okay? This is probably one of the lamest things I've ever heard. So prepare yourself to cringe.
We are black, white, Muslims, and we're Jews, and we're gay. We are black, white, Muslims, and we're Jews, and we're gay. We are black, white, Muslims.
Black, white, Muslims, Jews, and gay.
Black, white, Muslims,
Goodness
and
me.
we're Jews.
But it doesn't even fit the tune of the song.
It doesn't.
Ah,
It's so poor, isn't it?
I know. And the sign where it's just been spray painted on.
These were the kind of people who in school, they got marks for effort, you know what I mean?
There's a lot of marks there, isn't there?
Never for excellence. Yeah, there is a lot of marks there.
So
Bristol anti-racist.
Yes, I think it's something. Is it either anti-fascist or anti-far, something like that? Bristol something or other. Where is the sign? It'll swing around. No, anti-far.
Yeah.
Oh, right. So yes, an actual far left extremist group.
Yeah.
There you go. There's something to prescribe Keir Starmer.
Yeah. But of course, he never, ever, ever speaks about the far left.
He doesn't, does he?
Why is that?
Well, there's a lot of reasons he doesn't want to do that. So here is Brighton. This is the least surprising of all, the gay capital of Britain, not just because it's, I'm not using it in the sort of secondary school sense, but in the actual sense of statistically.
It is very gay, though.
Yeah, in both senses. But you can probably imagine that a lot of people turned out here, and you can see the police defending basically 4 blokes.
Oh, no. Imagine being those 4 blokes in the middle of all that. Wow.
I know, yeah. You just have to sort of wait it out, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
But here we go. And they're still trying to have a go at these 4 blokes.
So which ones are the Nazis in this scenario?
Supposedly these gentlemen here.
So not the ones attacking them.
No, that are masked up with the signs and aggressively trying to push past the police. It's the 4 people stood here.
Ah, okay.
It's just ridiculous.
Remind me, my history is a bit loose. So that the Nazis were the minority standing by when everyone else was trying to attack them.
I think that's a good reading of history. Yeah, okay. I think that's what is taught in schools these days, isn't it? So, also there are things going on in Newcastle. Lots of people turned out. You get the gist. Obviously, lots of Palestinian headbands and the likes. Who's moving the mouse? Get off. And Liverpool as well. Pretty big counter protest. No one to counter, of course, because no one turned up. Here's Aldershot, where some people did turn up. Here's Nick Tanconi, the interim leader of UKIP. And if we actually look at the video, there's a bunch of teenagers. There's hardly anyone really turned up. Most of these people probably not old enough to vote. I mean, bless Nick for trying to make something of it, but it was a tiny little protest. I mean, it wouldn't even reach the news if this weren't going on across the country. Good message.
Communists come off our streets.
Yeah. Also interesting.
What is that?
Yeah.
I've never seen the white letterbox before.
I know. I've seen plenty of red ones.
Like the summer alternative.
It might be, yeah. It's the new version that's come out. Oh. But yes, also Sheffield. This is an interesting one. This is certainly one the media doesn't want you to see. And here, a bunch of Muslims with weapons running down the street, chasing after a police van, it looks like, actually. But remember, the real danger is the far right.
Not these thugs.
No.
What are they going to do when they catch them?
I don't know. But that wasn't all, because there was more.
Oh.
Here we go.
Always after that blooming snack bar.
I know. But the police are having to retreat here.
This is sad. The police are running away.
But you get the idea that, yes, no one's going to cover this in the mainstream media. No one's going to say Muslims with machetes and pipes and weapons made the police retreat. No one cares about that.
This is not good. This is quite scary. Imagine just being an ordinary British citizen walking through that.
I wouldn't want to. I wouldn't want to live in Sheffield after seeing this happen, to be honest. And of course, the media ran its usual defence. BBC said successful night, Met Police Chief says, after mostly peaceful rallies across England. So they did
actually
the CNN thing.
Mostly peaceful.
They did, yeah. I screenshotted this morning, which is why it's purple from me clicking on it, thinking, hang on a minute, this can't be real, but it is. It is real.
They are a parody of themselves at this point.
They are.
Got to laugh because it's really
And also, Met Chief says police presence scared off rioters.
What? Nobody's scared of the police.
No one turned up.
We've just seen a load of youths running after the police and the police running away.
Mm-hmm. Yes, these youths just very enthusiastic about Allah for some reason.
Well, indeed, yet the far right are too scared. Oh, come on.
Yeah, I don't think so. So this is very interesting to me. This was a sort of mask-off moment to my mind. So we have the Mirror. Take note of the picture on the front cover. Standing together, thousands of anti-racism protesters turn out to fight far-right thugs.
Ain't that sweet?
And then we go to the Express. The same picture. United Britain stands firm against thugs. And then The Guardian. Thousands take to streets to counter threat from far right. Same picture. And then The Times. Thousands take to the streets to confront the far right.
Deja vu.
Mm-hmm. And I don't know whether we've got the Daily Mail, but they did the same thing as well. They were pretty egregious. I don't know whether you can pull that up, Samson. I thought it was amongst those. But I'll move on to the next one in the meantime. So there's also these. So this is the Daily Record. Peaceful protests quash fears of further violent disorder despite planned unrest in UK. And then we go to the Evening Standard. Peaceful protests quash fears of further violent disorder despite planned unrest. These are different publications with exactly the same titles.
Could it be that this is the government's response to the unrest that we've seen over the last week? And now they're saying, it's over, we fixed it.
Well, there are multiple different explanations, and I don't know whether that Daily Mail one is going to come up, but it was particularly egregious that supposedly a right-wing newspaper... The
I'll be showing it next anyway.
Oh, are you going to show it in your segment? Okay, that's fine. But this is something that people say has radicalized the right and caused the riots, and it's coming out and saying, you know, anti-racism protesters come out, and I can't remember the exact title, but it's basically taking the same line as all the others. So I wanted to have a little look at some of these as well.
Okay.
Some photo ops. So here we are.
Oh.
9-year-old Hassan Boston Khan tried on a police officer's helmet. Obviously,
Wait,
that's
is he the one?
significant.
I saw a police officer about that height, actually, with riot gear on. It was a little Khan all along.
It may well have been. And here we are, good vibes only with the police. And all of a sudden, there's people hugging our...
Al Estein.
Yes, and there we go. One man in Liverpool shook hands with a protester and received a cheer from a crowd after gesturing to them with both their hands in the air.
Peace has been restored.
I know, these protests were just so productive. Never mind the masked people and the Palestinian flag in the background.
Never mind the anti-racist shouting for genocide of an entire race.
No. That is not of concern, apparently. But there are lots of explanations to why there were meant to be hundreds of protests and about 4 people turned up to one in Brighton,
right,
and a bunch of teenagers that were probably not even intending to turn up to the protest who were just hanging about.
We don't even know those 4 people were protesting. They could have just been stuck there.
Passers-by, yeah.
With an England t-shirt on.
Yeah, and there's this explanation. This is obviously a satirical article. This isn't real. MI5 uncovers white supremacist plot to just sit back and enjoy the collapse of the United Kingdom.
I feel like we're living through that.
The notion that the far right just tried to wind people up and make them think there was a protest to make people concerned and then just sat back and let it happen. I don't think this actually happened. It's a possible explanation. Another one is that Hope Not Hate here, they had an update saying, we are prioritising 48 locations that have been mentioned as possible targets for far-right mobilisation.
By whom?
Mm-hmm. Yes, exactly. And they're circulating information here. I thought I linked their website, but basically they're saying that there will be all these locations. They said several days ago, a list of 39 locations was compiled and released in an extreme far-right Telegram channel, just not far-right, extreme far-right.
Right. It's getting worse.
One of the central online spaces behind this week's racist violence in Merseyside, this hit list of aspirational targets that calls for action up to and including terrorism. It, by the way, doesn't discourage people from going to these places that they've named. And if it was actually genuinely believed that they might conduct acts of terror, why would Hope Not Hate be saying, well, if you're going to here, please remain peaceful and, keep an anti-racist message and things like that, rather than it's going to be a potential bomb threat or something like that.
That's a good point. I mean, they've overused the term far-right so much now that when they think there's an actual far-right, they have to use the words extreme far-right. But if they're linking it to terrorism, let's flip it around. If we, from the centre-right or centrist, whatever we are, saw a potential Islamist terror threat, we'd say, avoid this area at all costs because we'd fear for people's lives. So this is clearly not the same. This is hyping up propaganda.
Yeah. You could even, if you're particularly cynical, interpret this as they know that this isn't going to happen and they're encouraging the counter-protest because if they exaggerate the threat of the far right, it mobilizes the left.
Have you got Nick Lawless' thing coming up next?
I do, yes. Okay. So it goes on to say, the single list created by one Telegram channel was likely one individual, differs from the wave of more organically organised riots and violence we have seen over the past week. So this is a sort of plausible deniability part that they're talking about. Most of the previous events were organised by individuals from those locations with support from local far-right activists and racists. They had to add that last part. But to be fair, that is what people have been saying, that it is a largely local phenomenon to, when even the Southport ones, you can recognise the accents of the people.
Right, because there's no far-right organisation. It's just local Brits who are fed up, hurt, upset and frustrated.
Exactly. And yes, they said, we found very little discussion within far-right networks about attending the places on this hit list, which means some locations may see no protests at all.
Some locations.
And this was long before any of the protests actually turned out, which I find interesting, that they're basically calling the bluff of it whilst no one else was. Interesting, isn't it?
It is.
But of course, they say, if you're planning to attend a counter-demonstration, please be positive, peaceful and safe. Don't let the far-right bait you and your community into lashing out. But I thought there was going to be acts of terror going on. Hope Not Hate. Why are you encouraging them to go there then?
That's quite dangerous, actually.
It is. And Here's Nick Lowell saying, yes, the list was a hoax, but just look at the front pages of today's papers. An anti-racist message is being transmitted to millions of homes this morning in a very uniform way that almost indicates, to my mind, that there is no there's no organicness to it. It's all come from a single source. If everything is the same, it's got a single origin point. That much is pretty much obvious. And I think that what has actually happened here is that the intelligence services have directed something here, because the police do not have the capacity to deal with the riots. The ones last weekend already stretched them.
Yeah.
And then that's no doubt what Starmer in his Cobra meetings has been discussing. And when they're concerned about the country turning to widespread disorder without the ability to deal with it, it is perfectly feasible to suggest that the intelligence services carried out an operation to try and de-escalate tensions, which I think is what has gone on here.
But that in particular looks like Nick Laws is involved in it. Maybe I'm misreading it, but it sounds like he's a part of this hoax and he's happy because the propaganda worked.
Well, there has been a lot of speculation, which I cannot confirm, that there is a connection between them and some intelligence services. I've heard many people say it. I haven't necessarily seen any evidence for it myself. So please don't take that at face value. But
our intelligence services potentially working with commies.
Mm-hmm. It's not the first time, is it? But I think that the fact that the media parroted the same lines all at the same time, the same narrative, all together using the same images, the protesters had the same stand up to racism placards all across the country that seemingly got out very quickly, didn't they? They're made available very easily.
Yeah.
And maybe just at the onset of these riots, you know, they were just very hot on sending them out, and it was just stand up to racism being very good at logistics. It's possible. However, the uniformity of everything that has gone on and how this has all been lapped up suggests to me that there is some sort of planning involved, some sort of intelligence involved. And I think circulating fake protest info to left-wing circles to mobilize them, I don't think the people turning up realized that it was something that could potentially be inorganic or a waste of their time.
Right.
And then they gate-kept it from the right. So no actual right-wingers turned up. And this ensures only the left turn up. It allows them to get photo ops and claim that they had a peaceful protest. And it's also worth mentioning that many of the anti-immigration protests stayed peaceful, but the media focused on the ones that turned violent because there were counter-protesters there. Yeah. And so without any opposition there, they could more easily control the narrative and have sort of a free open season in the media to try and shift it as saying, well, you're not the majority, you don't stand for what we believe. You know, there are lots of people that are anti-immigration, and therefore it's an attempt to de-escalate tensions. I don't necessarily see it working. We'll have to see in the future. But it does seem like something suspicious has gone on here.
Yeah, because when we saw on Sky News, the counter-protesters last week were becoming quite violent and aggressive. They seemed upset by it because they couldn't. They almost wanted to turn around and say, "We're on your side, guys. You know, don't let the side down." And so this is a narrative that they could control.
Absolutely, and I think that although we don't know for certain what happened, there are lots of interesting questions to ask about why these hundreds of protests that were supposedly planned circulated in all of the mainstream media, and then hardly a soul turned up.
And these lefties, these far lefties with the placards, they're busting everywhere. When I used to go to the drag queen storytime protest, you'd see them get busting with their placard. Like, it's a professional unit at this point. They are almost paid to protest.
I don't doubt it. I hope you appreciated that segment from the podcast The Lotus Eaters. And if you want to see what else we're doing, you can follow Dan's series, Brokenomics, where he talks about broken systems. And if you want to see all the other work that we're putting out and you don't want to miss anything, you can follow us on Twitter. And we always post links to all of the work we're putting out so you don't miss a single thing. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.